Full disclosure, this interview was conducted with the full cooperation and permission of the Lumen Corps. Howdy, I'm Jeff Goldsmith, and this is the Q&A. My agenda is simple. Each week I plan to bring you in-depth insights into the creative process of storytelling. And folks, this is a really fun one today. We have with us Severance actor Dichen Lachman, aka Gemma. And aside from just loving the show, it was really fun to interview Dichen because we've known each other for many years and she has such a profound interest in storytelling. She used to come to all my Q&As, stay for the Q&As, then was listening in the podcast. And I can't say enough good things about her, but I'm going to over the course of this podcast. So prepare yourselves. I love Severance, and if you think about it, her role is really complicated because while everyone else is playing two different versions of themselves, Dichen is playing many versions of herself, including a version of herself occasionally in someone else's flashback. So there are a lot of layers to her performance. It is, of course, Emmy eligible, and Dichen was very forthcoming about her creative process. So I know you'll dig this episode. And while you're surfing around online, I hope you also check out Backstory Magazine. It's our 13th year. We just published our new issue, which is our Emmys Contenders and Summer issue, issue 56. You could see what's inside on our website. And it's also my 20th year of podcasting. And I'm just here to say, folks, I couldn't have done it without your support. I really appreciate it. If you've never read Backstory before, you could test drive us by reading us on our website, backstory.net, or on our iPad app, Backstory. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see these Zooms that I'm recording. That's right, you could see us talk. It would really mean a lot to me to have you show your support for independent entertainment journalism. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now, without any further ado, let's jump right into our interview with actor Dichen Lachman about her career and, of course, her role on Severance, which is Emmy eligible. Dichen, it's great to see you. How you doing?
I'm good. I was just thinking about how long we go back, and I think it's almost 20 years.
I think it is too. You were there in the beginning when I started podcasting and doing it.
You were the first.
Yeah, I was one of the first in 2005. This is my 20th year of podcasting, and as a lot of people know, the way it started was as screenings here in Los Angeles. I would audio record the Q&A, and I guess that's a question I was going to ask you later, but I'll ask you right now. As an actor, here's what was interesting: you always showed up to these Q&As. You really loved them, but they were writers and directors. It wasn't like you were showing up to actor Q&As like the SAG Foundation does so well. What did you get out of it? What were you looking for? Because I think it really gave you an insight into the people that you're working with as an actor, but I've always been curious.
I was so excited to be speaking with you because you're actually like right there at the beginning where I started forging my journey in Los Angeles. Your podcast was like at the beginning of, I guess, podcasting, and there were very few windows behind the curtain, basically, of Los Angeles. And I discovered you through my boyfriend at the time, who was an aspiring screenwriter, director, and in Australia, no less. And I had been planning to come to Los Angeles, and he was like, oh, you should definitely listen to this podcast because it's got really interesting origin stories. And I love the way you always started with that, like, how did you get into the business? Because before the internet and content, like, just there was just a plethora of it on the internet like now. Back then, it was so limited. All the little knowledge I had of what it was like in, Hollywood was maybe special features, like behind the scenes, and a few interviews that you would catch on like behind the actor's studio. That there was that show. It was so limited. And your podcast, which you would record after your screenings, it was such a big window into the process of how something gets made. And filmmaking in general is what always inspired me, not just the acting component, but the collaboration that goes into place in order to make anything happen. And I just thought that it was so remarkable. So when we got to LA and we were actually able to get on these lists to come and see the movie and hear you interview the writer director or just the writer, it was like such an incredible learning experience, and it gave me such an extraordinary insight into their process, which I feel like as an actor it helps you to know and understand the process of other artisans and craftspeople in the world that you function in.
Well, thanks, Mom, first and foremost. My mom couldn't have given a more glowing review. But, it was interesting because, I kept seeing you at the screenings. Some people stay at the Q&A, some don't. You always would stay. And then as you kept evolving, I think you were a hair shy at first, but you started asking questions. And they weren't dumb questions in the least. They were very smart, thoughtful questions. And I was kind of seeing, how the process of getting to know these writers and directors was affecting you as an actor. And I thought it was really cool, by the way, because it was oh, these Q&As aren't just for writers, actors.
Oh, I mean, those Q&As, for anyone who's curious, who might even be listening now and want to know more about it, I mean, you can go back. I mean, there's you have so much you can listen to. It's so important to be able, I mean, the Q&A is almost the most interesting part of it. I actually think I was in one in Santa Monica once where the lights went out and you had Luc Besson there.
Oh my God.
We just
wow, you were there. Yes, we were in Beverly Hills at the Fine Arts Theater. It was Angel A. You're absolutely right. And the lights went out, and Luc Besson was such a good guy that he wanted to keep going, and everyone turned on their cell phone flashlights. And that's what lit us. And it was when I just had started using a backup recorder just in case something happened. And the backup recorder actually saved that podcast because when the power went out to the main recorder, we lost that audio. So
I remember it vividly because one thing, coincidentally, that actress actually did a photo shoot with me as the photographer, about 8 years ago. And then I was in that same theater for a screening of Severance.
Oh,
and
wow.
Ben and the cast and Dan, we were all on the stage there. And while people were while they were doing the Q&A, I was going back to that time when the lights went out with you. It's so important, I think, as an actor to understand a writer's process. And, I don't want to dob anyone in, but I think often actors don't appreciate the painstaking efforts that writers or writer-directors go to when they write the script, and they'll read something and sometimes they won't be kind about the scene and they'll say, oh, my character wouldn't say this, or this isn't written very well, I want to say it like this. And I think by going to your screenings, I've never, ever said that on to another craftsman, because as an actor, if someone came up to you and said, oh, that wasn't very good, it breaks you a little bit. It's not the right way to criticize something, or it's not constructive. So when I have an idea or I'm finding something challenging, I always go and approach the writer who is also a craftsman with respect and look, I have an idea, or help me understand this, because, they're people. And I feel especially in television, actors can sometimes forget that someone spent a lot of time laboring over their keyboard to bring these people to life and treating the material as respectfully as possible. I think it's just something that your screenings, that opportunity to see behind the process from the very seedling of the idea really helped me.
No, I'm glad it did, and I appreciate the kudos. And I've always wondered, because you have that experience and because you're so thoughtful as an actor, have you ever considered writing directing? Because in a way, you've studied it.
I mean, in a way, yes, I would love to. I think one of my dear writer friends, Matt Wheeler, always said writing is rewriting, and I think that that's the thing that people who aren't naturally into the craft, that's that biggest hurdle to get over, is getting through the many iterations of all the drafts and taking notes and criticisms from your friends, trusted people who you would give your script to. And I have written things, they're not very good, but it is something that I am working on. It's just part of me, when you talk about origin stories in your Q&As, I think I'm still going through my origin story in the sense that I need to get a real handle on my voice and who I am in this space as an actor, and then I feel like there'll be more clarity in my writing. So it's sort of a personal journey, but I do feel like that might be on the cards one day, because I do enjoy doing it, and I think actors are especially talented at bringing characters to life on the page. And I'll speak for myself and maybe a few of my friends who've also in the same position struggling with the process. It's the structural elements of it that I think we tend to bump up against. And I mean, the landscape's changing, in terms of a television show. The rules that were in place when many years ago I was going to your screenings are changing, and the format, there's a more fluidity. I think back then, like 10, 15 years ago, there was a rigidity to writing a TV show. But I think everything's sort of opening up, and that might allow me and other people to kind of flourish in that environment where
I hope it does.
We're more open. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, and obviously the experimentation that's going on in TV right now, especially on Severance, is fantastic. But I'm going to skip back a second because we didn't do your origin story so much, at the beginning. Like, just for our listeners to give a quick baseline, who are you and from whence dost thou hail? And also, did you study acting? Did you go to school for it? Because that's part of it that I don't remember either.
Yeah, well, I was born in Kathmandu, Nepal, and I moved to Australia when I was 7. Had very little access to lots of content, but enough. I fell in love with movies. My parents loved watching movies, but it felt like light years away to even contemplate being a part of it because of just the world was not as connected as we are now. I decided I'd just give it a shot. So I moved to Sydney, Australia, and did what all wonderful actors end up doing, waitressing in Sydney. Right. I did not go to university because, my husband went to Syracuse, and I think the rules still apply. If you go to a university to study acting, they won't let you audition and work. And I discovered this very late. I wasn't a child. I was like, turning 20 when I decided I wanted to do this. And I figured that if I gave 4 years of my life to a school without getting into the workplace, that's a lot of time as an actress at the time, especially. And so I decided to sign up to night classes with this wonderful woman who sadly passed, but it was in an old church in Balmain, and we would go from 6 p.m. if she was on time. She was notoriously late till, sometimes 3 a.m. in the morning. Wow. And that's where I got my education. And my first, I did a commercial, I did a small movie for 20th Century Fox. They were my first gigs. But then I landed a soap opera called Neighbours, which was institutional television at the time in Australia and in the United Kingdom, where it was like wallpaper TV. And that's what gave me enough savings to really try and make it in Los Angeles, where a lot of the actors were going. Like all of my predecessors on Neighbours recently had gone to LA, and it was like the next big step. I was also very aware just at the time, because of the way I looked, that my opportunities might have been limited, especially with the limited amount of content that was being made in Australia at the time. So in 2005, I went to Los Angeles and ended up at a screening with Jeff. It all started from there. But about a year later, I got an incredible show called Dollhouse, which
with Joss Whedon. Yep.
Yeah. Amazing, loyal fan base. And that's really was my first big break. Yeah. Because Joss had an incredible team of writers on that show. And because of the work ethic and the work I put into that show, a lot of them just kept hiring me. So that was awesome. Like my first big break.
Look, I watched you go from that to also Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is where I think you met your husband, right? Because he was on it too.
Yes, actually, Enver Jokai, who was on Dollhouse, he did 2 movies very coincidentally back to back with Max. Then Max came out to LA and I met him there. But no, we were together before Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then obviously Jurassic Park, you've had a bit of a villainous role. So you've done a lot of genre stuff. But I guess, what do you remember about the audition for Severance, about the audition for season 1?
Yes. So I remember just being being absolutely sort of blown away by what to do with this because I had so little context. I was like, who is this person? Why is she speaking? Like, why is she saying what she's saying? It made very little sense to me. But I knew there was something special about her. I self-taped because I think I was traveling at the time for some other stuff and it was just a scheduling thing. So I self-taped and I sent it through just, hoping that, because just of the people involved, I was like, I hope I get some traction on this because it's an incredible team of people. And, you always want to work with these amazing people. It's like a dream come true. And then Rachel Tenner, who's a wonderful casting director, gave me some notes because I didn't have any context. And she was like, I think they're going to respond to this tape, but I just want to give her a little bit more information. It was still limited though.
Sorry to interrupt. Was it just a Miss Casey monologue?
It was the Irving scene where she's telling Irving B about his Audi facts. And obviously the script, as you know, I mean, it changes and it wasn't ultimately what we filmed on the day with that scene, but there were a few more Audi facts in there. And I sent it off and Ben really responded to the tape, which was incredibly exciting. And we set up a Skype call. And I think COVID was just starting, or maybe it hadn't started yet, actually, but it was right before. We had like a really nice conversation. He was so gracious. And also, obviously he's kind of ubiquitous as he's like a movie star. And you have an idea of how he's going to be, but he was super like low key and thoughtful and just totally different to any persona that I'd ever seen him play. And it was a really nice conversation. But at that point, they weren't sure with the Jurassic World schedule if everything was going to be able to line up. So we had a nice talk and it was just sort of left up in the air. And then obviously extraordinary times for the whole world, and they shut down and everything shut down. And it was much later when Jurassic was the first production. Colin and all the producers on that team were extraordinary. They were kind of like the guinea pig going back into production during such an extraordinary time. So we were the first big studio thing to actually film. As that was going along, Severance was still shut down. A lot of things didn't start until months and months after we had started filming at the Langley. We were filming in Pinewood, but we were bubbled in this hotel called the Langley. And because of just the timing of that, it turned out that I could do it. And I couldn't have been more thrilled.
And that was 2021, right?
Yeah. No, 2020. Cool. Yes. And Severance started filming again. They picked production back up at the end of 2020, like in November, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think it was around then. I mean, it was a long time ago.
No, sure. I mean, did you guys have rehearsal for Severance? Like, TV shows a lot of times don't get a lot of rehearsal. Was there any rehearsal period before the season, or is it just like kind of show up, know your lines, and we're going to go over blocking, and there isn't really much of a rehearsal period?
I will say, due to COVID, the rehearsals tended, well, at least for me, my experience of season 1, we did it on set. And because of all the protocols, what we would do is we wouldn't cut. We would just do the scene and then we would go back to the beginning because the reset measures and everything would take up so much time. And then it was also more contact with other people. And so to limit contact and limit like the turnaround from, cut and then fixing a little thing here or there, going back into final touches, masks on, masks off, shields on, shields off. It was a lot. And then also more contact with humans. I didn't experience rehearsal so much. It's just, I think in my experience, we just took a lot more time to do things. It just took a long time. In season 2, obviously that was in the past. And we were blessed to be able to have rehearsals and carve out time, especially for important scenes. Especially, there is an episode in season 2 that was very important, and we were able to do it on the weekend, on the location. So it was just incredibly valuable to have that. And it's not often the case to be able to do that.
That's great. Going back for a second for a silly question, what was your worst audition? What's the one in your life that haunts you to this very day?
Oh my God, I may have just had one. It's so funny, one of the worst auditions in terms of making mistakes throughout the audition was for, I think it was NCIS Los Angeles. And
Okay.
I went in there and I just butchered it. Like, I just forgot all my lines. There were so many people in the room and I did a terrible job. And I was like, I am never going to get that. That is not going my way. They're going to pick somebody else. And I got it. And I was like, wow, okay, sometimes things just don't make sense. But then I've had auditions where the phone rang, like while I was in the middle of the audition, and the casting person answered it. I've had ones where I've stopped halfway and said, let me take that back, after I waited 3 hours and got towed. And they were like, never mind, that's good. Just had to leave the room.
And you still had to go get your car out of being impounded. Wow.
Everyone has these stories, right? If you're an actor and you got into this business before self-taping, everyone has those stories of waiting for hours and hours and getting parking tickets and getting towed. Also before, like, the tap to pay on the meters in LA.
Yeah.
You had to have quarters or dimes. The list is so long, Jeff.
Yeah. I believe it. Lots of trauma that you want to sever as an actor. Well, look, I think that's a good place to go into our spoilers. So podcast listeners in Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, if you have not seen seasons 1 and 2 of Severance, please press pause, correct that. It's waiting for you right now on Apple TV. You could watch it because we are going to get into spoilers. So you have been forewarned.
And you do not want to ruin this show.
Yeah, you do not want to ruin the show. Go watch it, please. I think one of the things to get right into is, at what point did they tell you in season 1 that Miss Casey is actually Gemma? Because I could see them not telling you, or I could see them letting you know all along. So I'm curious about that.
Right. So I found out that Miss Casey was Gemma at the end of my Skype call with Ben. And I think he was very reluctant to tell me because he wasn't sure if it was going to work out. And Ben's very protective of the work and the audience experience. But he, for some reason, decided to tell me. So I did know. And because of the very long pause in production due to the pandemic, when I finally was able to do the job and the scheduling worked out, I was able to read all of the scripts from beginning to end. So I did know from the beginning.
That's great. Well, so then as an actor, how do you apply that? Because Miss Casey season 1, it's a very strange trick to play in which what Ben Stiller and the writers have engineered and you is that there's a certain rewatchability to your scenes in which, yes, we see her as Miss Casey, a kind of almost a lost character, a little dreamlike sense of her. But we also know in the episodes with Mark, when you would go back and rewatch them from season 1, that she did have a sense of something there, but nobody could put their finger on it. And you as an actor obviously don't want to tip the scales. So tell us about the challenges of playing that in season 1.
I think it was a tricky challenge. What I will say is that being in such incredible hands makes it easier in terms of being able to have that time to film those scenes and really explore those scenes. The first episode I did, Ben was directing. He really was so open to finding the relaxation in that space and just finding the right tone. He also knew exactly what music he was going to play in that scene with Irving. That was my first big day, giving Irving his Audi facts. And that really helped direct me tonally in terms of where she was in her speed and everything. And then the incredible editors, because we tried so many different things. It's really such a collaboration in terms of this show that you don't always feel on everything, because every detail is so important. Everyone contributes this weight to your character. So you really feel like there's input from everybody. And in a sense, there is always that. But this show, the attention to detail is like nothing I've ever worked on.
It's so wild because in season 1, you really, like, even if there was never a reveal that you were Gemma, right? Even if it didn't turn out that you had this past with the character of Mark, there was something so dreamlike about your character that was different from anyone else on the severed floor. It was almost like this extra disconnect. It's very hard to play because if you did it wrong, if you leaned too far into being lost, it would stick out more as a sore thumb. But you really walk that tightrope of being engaged in the scene with your fellow actors, but also seeming distant, which I think was very difficult to play because, interestingly, none of the other actors play their severed characters like that at all. So I'm just curious if there was any additional direction about you having this feeling of involved with your character of almost this distance.
I will say, in the back of my mind, there's still parts of yourself that you're just like locked in and out of because of the scene where Mark's building the tree in the wellness center out of clay. I made an internal choice, which I just always had in the back of my mind, that I was like drawn to being with them and with him in that group. There was something that was like pulling me towards him. And then the disconnect came with, for me, I wasn't really sure what season 2 was going to bring. And maybe this was the wrong thing to do, but I decided to believe that she had been in a car accident. And I don't know, like, what she went through to get from there to there. And so I feel like I just decided that there was something very broken inside her. And I had like different ideas that I played with. I just decided to make her a broken person, more broken than the people who have voluntarily in the space, because I decided she wasn't necessarily voluntarily there. And we still actually don't have the answer to that question.
True. Yeah, no, I know. And that's what's, again, so interesting about the character. I'm curious, as an actor, when you break down your characters, some actors love to do intense backstories and plot out childhood forward to the point of, the narrative taking place. Some actors don't. They like the material that's in the script and they don't see the need to create outside of it. Back in season 1, how important was that to you to create a backstory for Casey Gemma?
Yeah, that's interesting, just because of the subject, the nature of the subject. I do sometimes love doing backstory. I actually did Colin must have raised his eyebrows considering the size of the part, how much backstory he got about Soyona Santos when I got Jurassic World. But funny little fact, he actually sent that to the Camp Cretaceous and the Chaos Theory team years later, because they actually incorporated that into just helping them create her character in the animation series.
You almost got a writing credit. See?
Almost. So I do love doing that. For this, I knew what I knew about Gemma just through what the other characters said about her. But because of her state, I decided to try a different approach. And I actually listened to, is it Eckhart Tolle, or is that how you pronounce it?
I think so. I think you got it.
He talks about the ego and the inner child and pain body a lot. And so I listened to one of his talks and I just went through and I found the character there. And that's why I was talking about her being broken. And I think what you were touching on perhaps is when you said that disconnect, she's in this like pain body, she's living in this sort of place. It's not like a rope, but maybe like a string to that, I used his sort of mind journey to find Miss Casey and to integrate Gemma through subconscious and inner child and that world. So I didn't do like a deep backstory for Miss Casey because obviously she's 107 hours old.
Right.
But I did want to have her grounded in something that felt really authentic. And I hope it worked.
No, it definitely did. And I think a ghost-like quality was also something that really stirred a lot of fan debate in season one because people were like, after the reveal, they're like, okay, well, is she alive in reality or is she, a consciousness at Lumen? So like kind of the ghost-like aspect really fueled a lot of theories in, season one before season two, or after season one.
Well, I think
And
that ambiguity is kind of cool, right?
oh yeah,
Because
absolutely.
it
And
lets her.
again, it's a testament to your performance because to capture that, to have the intimacy with Mark, but Miss Casey still doesn't even understand completely in season one why it's there. It's just a feeling. And so that's why it's so interesting to hear that rather than a full backstory, you did a psychological makeup for
Yeah.
Miss Casey. And you could tell it informed your performance. I guess as we get past season one, was there anything fun that was cut that you kind of missed that, would have ended up on a Blu-ray deleted scene or something like that you want to tell us about in season one?
I think actually most of it made it. There may have been a couple of scenes on MDR, like not scenes, but just little snippets that may have, missed the boat. But I think most of
Okay.
it, yeah. I mean, it did change, and some of those artifacts changed a little
Sure.
bit. Some of the interactions, but I think the wonderful thing about this show is they go through it so carefully that I don't think if it was there, it would have added anything,
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
It also brings me to a question like this could be for both season one and season two. The writing is so specific that I'm curious how much room there is for improvisation because obviously there's so much lore and world building going on sometimes that you can't really improvise that. But some of the stuff that's more emotional and character connectiveness, I would think maybe there's a little room there, but I'm curious. You tell us.
It is rare to be able to get to get into improvising too much. When you're in the machinery of it all, on this, there's no sort of bad idea. Like Ben and, even like Jessica, who I worked with quite a lot in season two, they're so happy to try things. And the writers who are there as well are like, yeah, try that. If it's not important, like you have to say this line, otherwise like the audience is going to get confused or this doesn't make sense later down the track. They were really open to trying things. And with Adam and Michael and Jen and Zach and Patricia, I mean, John, Chris, the list of amazing actors just goes on and on. I don't even know how I got to like be in the same pool. They're going to bring something. They're going to bring something interesting, and they got the part because they obviously have like extraordinary talent, and so why not? And I think that if you haven't already spoken to some of the other cast members, they'll agree that they had a lot of flexibility to try different things.
Well, so here's the most interesting thing about trying different things. As we get into season two, you're now playing multiple characters. You're playing a Gemma that is trapped at Lumen. You're playing Gemma in flashbacks that seem to be almost a combo of Gemma's own flashbacks and Mark's flashbacks at times. And then you're also playing, a few of these 25 different severed versions of Gemma, and Miss Casey appears in season two. So like for all the actors that are continuing to play the roles that we already know and expect from them, you are the one that is all over the map, but you're having a continuity to it in your performance. We know it's still you. We know it's still different parts of the same character. How hard was that for you as an actor to track all these different versions of your one character, like all the different versions of Gemma, I guess you could say?
It was a daunting thing to read when I first got it because I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to really separate all of this. And obviously, like even though I'm very methodical, I will use different different color highlighters. I've got post-it notes everywhere. I write all over my scripts, and it sort of looks like, I don't know what it looks like. It doesn't look like a script anymore by the time I'm done with it.
Well, wait, sorry to interrupt. Tell us what some of your colors mean on your highlights, because that's always interesting to hear.
It's like, especially with something like this, like I'll have to thread different timelines together. And so then I'll have to keep that color consistent and then the other color consistent with that, just because I'm very visual and I tend to sort of see things. And if I color code it, then I have this, like, when I'm working on it, like I know where I am in which journey, because the script is like this, right? That episode 7, it's all over the place, and using different colors really helps me just track it in terms of each separate journey. It was nerve-wracking. I mean, I've had experiences of doing that stuff, before. The pressure then felt just as much as the pressure now to not let anybody down and do a good job. I think what was great was that I had the incredible assistant just as a crafts person to have all these different looks that were so specific, and the rooms were so specific. And so that really helped inform where the tension in my body was, what she would be feeling, space, the kind, and so my physicality choices really helped, as well as the amazing workmanship that went around creating each separate character.
The geekiest thing I could ask is that at one point it's revealed, because we're talking about episode 7, Chakai Bardo, and your performance throughout was just amazing because you have to go so far across the map, back and forth. The geekiest thing I could say is that they talk about at one point some of the rooms representing Kier's 4 tempers, that of woe, frolic, dread, and malice. Were those words that were important to you, like in considering how you were going to act in some of those rooms, like, ranging from the air turbulence on the airplane to the dentist visit from hell to which we never even see, but your performance was so great that we know that it's bad, even though we never saw a thing happen to you, to the, purgatory of writing Christmas cards forever. So I'm just curious if those words ever kind of came into play of woe, frolic, dread, and malice.
Not consciously. I think because there's so many rooms, there's so many different rooms. I just went with, like, what would in just that environment, where would their fear center be and where would their tension be? And I even at one point I thought, oh, maybe the airplane turbulence scene, she could be having a great time. It was just like an idea that I had. But that's the thing, is like we did play with different things, and those were the way that it came out is what we went with. But funny thing about the dentist scene, there was a point very early on before the writer's strike where they were actually going to go in my mouth, and we had a professional, like an actual dentist there, and they were trying to figure out how they would get the camera inside my mouth and work on my teeth. And I had a teeth cast here in London, and there were meetings and meetings about like how we were going to like shoot this. In a way, I'm really glad that went away, because just having, your mouth open for 8 hours is just
That's
like
not fun.
a nightmare. I did not like specifically think of those.
Well, yeah, and I was curious if it was direction as well. I guess, were there any rooms that were shot that we never saw beyond those 3? Were there any other rooms that were shot?
You know what? No. I mean, we never got to see her in her little tennis outfit. I still would love to take Dan out for a drink and be like, all right, so what's in all the other rooms? He tells me, and I wonder if we'll ever get any flashbacks, because it's a lot of rooms.
Again, what's interesting, and like I've seen different discussion, is like of those 4 words of woe, frolic, dread, and malice, we see 3 of them for sure as part of Gemma's experience, being woe, dread, and malice. Malice being when she revolts against Dr. Maurer, which we're going to talk about in a second. But frolic, allegedly, the only place I could sense it, if those are the 4 words that they were focusing on, is the flashbacks with Mark for the kind of meet cutes, the happy parts of their marriage. But it's not clear if those are Gemma's flashbacks or Mark's because of the process that he's undergoing. I don't know where the line blurs between those two.
That's what's so cool about it, right? because the way they wove it together, there's that beautiful ambiguity.
Ooh, hey, I'm jumping in really quick to remind you to check out Backstory Magazine. We just published our new issue. It's our summer issue. It's our Emmy contenders issue. It's issue 56, darn it, and it's our 13th year of publishing, and I couldn't have done it without you. Heck, it's my 20th year of podcast, and I certainly couldn't have done that without you. So thanks a lot for all your support. If you've never read Backstory before, you could test drive us by reading us on a desktop or laptop at backstory.net, or you could read us in our iPad app, Backstory. There's a free issue to be found on both. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoomcasts. That's right, you could see us talking. It would really mean a lot to me to have you support my passion project and support independent entertainment journalism. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. But now let's jump right back into our conversation with actor Dichen Lachman, of course, talking about her career and her role on Severance, which is Emmy eligible. There's a couple shots close on your face where the lighting changes and brings you into a new scene. It seems like one of them was maybe a match cut of lighting changes, but another one of them seems like it might have been performed live on set and then the camera pulls back. Do you remember that? Because your face is going through a lot of emotion on those lighting changes.
If you're talking about the scene where she's at lunch with her brother and sister-in-law and Mark, that was done practically. I was there, and then as the lighting changed, I went through the process of what she was going, like transitioning into the scene in the bathroom, and it was all practical. And then when they come out of the face, then we're in another scene. But the transition was like, yeah, all on the day.
I think the revolt against Dr. Mao is really interesting because he's being cruel. He says that Mark has moved on. He's saying this to Gemma as herself, and that he even has a kid, which, as we learn in that episode 7, was, so important to their marriage and everything about them. And that makes her snap. For all the compliance that we've seen her give, Gemma snaps at that point. She bashes him over the head with a chair, has this great run through the hallways, being, chased by Cecily, great Sandra Bernhard, makes it into the elevator only to, unfortunately, go back to become Miss Casey, who is, sent back down. And I'm just curious what you could tell me about that sequence, because there was a lot going on, and I would just love to know about the discussions of getting Gemma to that breaking point where she really, for whatever reason she's there, be it that she's kidnapped or that she's volunteering with the carrot of, guaranteed pregnancy at the end of this trial, she has had it at that point. And that is the point where she wants to escape. So I would love to hear about those discussions.
I mean, I think ultimately there's this one final room, and
Cold Harbor.
Yeah. She asks him about it, like what happens when I've been in all the rooms, and he gives her like this bullshit answer. And I think that when he says that to her, she says she doesn't believe him. And she wants to believe that she doesn't believe him. But I think it's kind of like, well, I don't know what's going to happen to me. I'm just going to try and make a run for it. In my mind, I feel like she's tried to do that before.
Oh, really? So you think that might not even be the first escape attempt?
I feel like that because
Sure.
Drummond says, didn't she break your fingers or something? To Mauer, I think earlier,
Yeah.
or she break your hand. And that gave me this clue that, okay, she has been difficult in the past, whether it was coming out of one of the rooms or in one of these sessions where he's like measuring her brain or her head. I don't even know what those machines do. They're so fancy. But that gave me an indication that she tried before. Like I had to believe that she tried before, and either she never got as far as that, or maybe she did get that far, but just hanging on to this hope that once she got into the elevator, something would change this time, sort of in a denial. So that's why I feel like she gets to that point where she just goes for it again, this like last time. And I think when she comes back down and Sandra kind of scoops her up off the floor, I feel like she feels very defeated at that point and has like almost given up, because it's like, she tried again and they're not giving her clear answers and she's just trapped in this hell.
I think that makes sense. And I mean, dramatically, aside from that scene of revolt, inversely, the other scenes that you had to play were really the dissolution of the marriage. I mean, sorry, it does not dissolve, but the rocky times in the marriage, showing that especially the drunken night. We like to think of Mark as like, a good guy, but the night where he's drinking and not violently, but angrily dismantling the crib, and you're just kind of in the other room, like letting it happen because you're not really sure what else to do. And then, of course, the sequences of her dealing with her miscarriage, possibly for the third time. They say that it didn't work out 3 times, so I don't know if it was exactly 3 miscarriages. That's a lot for an actor as well. And I mean, as I just said, in one of those scenes, you're just alone, and in the other scene, you're comforted by Mark, in the shower. What were the challenges for you of approaching those scenes and keeping a dignity to your character under these really tough times?
That was difficult. Jumping around, like the flashbacks in the house, we shot right at the end of the season. So we shot out of order, which was, I thought, really beneficial because Adam and I got to spend more time together just as a byproduct, shooting 10, and we got to just be more comfortable with each other. And that always helps when you get to know an actor, a little bit about their family, like you feel like more comfortable. You're not like, it's that exposure therapy in a way. So that was really lucky. We finally got to that house and had to go through like all these like different emotions. On top of that, which by the way was the coolest thing ever, had a really like a time crunch, final, few days of the season, but we were going outside to grab like footage on a Bolex camera. So Ben was like second unit filming on this Bolex to grab like as many little like happy moment flashbacks, things that we could get in between setups.
Right, in 16 millimeter, which was great.
Yeah, exactly. So we got to it was really actually cool. It was challenging because you're going outside and you're happy and you're coming back in, and then you have to do something a little bit heavier. And so you're jumping between these different emotional states. I cannot tell you how exciting it was, like to be challenged in that way, to be shooting on film with a totally different workflow. As you know, it's a different process and the crew has to work differently. And I mean, it's so rare that you get to shoot on film. Jess also had a different DP, so she could really focus on the performances and capturing what she needed to get. It was like gymnastics, I mean, yeah. Adam was also just so stellar. We couldn't have done it without, like in that time frame, without the crew. And it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience. And I feel really lucky that, they felt safe giving me that challenge.
It was also cool that, that was Jess's directorial debut pretty much, that episode. And she had been cinematographer on Severance. So that was cool for probably added some great energy as well.
Absolutely. When I found out about episode 7 happening and I found out Jessica was going to direct it, I was so excited because I think she is an absolute force of nature, and she's brought so much to the show. And I just always saw, I was like, there is a director here. Absolutely. So I couldn't have been more thrilled.
And we're interviewing her for Backstory Magazine about her directorial debut. So she's going to have her own piece as well. It's interesting, as an actor, what was a piece of direction that really surprised you? Because you could do so much prep and it could be turned upside down in a cool way when a director gives you kind of a curveball, meant to elicit a certain type of performance or have you reset as an actor. What was something that you remember in season 2, either in episode 7 or 10, that was an interesting piece of direction that surprised you?
I feel like I was always being surprised.
Okay.
With like Jessica was really cool in like throwing different things at you that weren't planned, which was like sometimes unique. Working with Ben is always surprising because as an actor, he's able to communicate with you on a totally different level. Just like really get like in there with you almost, and push you in a way that I don't think a director who maybe wasn't an actor can really do. And so for me, it was constantly surprising. I'm trying to think of like one specific thing. I will say, like I talked about it earlier, Ben would often play music. I found that just for any aspiring directors out there or writing producers or writers, I found that extraordinarily helpful. Like if there's a piece of music that really speaks to to you for the scene, even if you don't end up getting the rights to it, or you can't afford it if it's an indie movie or whatever. If there's a piece of music that like communicates the tone of how you want a scene to be, give it to the actor, like play it beforehand or send them an email with the music, because music conveys so much emotion and things that it can articulate things for you that you may not be able to articulate yourself. And I think it's an extraordinary tool. And when Ben would do that, because he didn't just do it once, he would often do it, I just thought, that's genius. That's never happened to me before. And it's so precise. It's communicating exactly where I need to be perfectly. And I understand.
It's a great thing to do for non-dialogue sequences, to have that running on set so that the actors can hear it and feel it. So that makes sense.
Or even play it beforehand, even if there is dialogue.
Oh,
you know
okay.
what I mean? Or play it in the background quietly during a rehearsal, because there's like a tempo to it.
That's cool.
But also no dialogue scenes. Like, I think that was so beautiful, and it really felt like, wow, like this is a different process. Like we're getting to do something really different, because I'd never experienced that before.
Well, fans were really leading up to the finale, and the moment of reunification of Mark and Gemma as Mark and Gemma. So that was a great scene. But right after that, you're all over the place again as an actor in a good way. And like he's changing, you're forgetting who you are. Tell us about the challenges of that, and just first what the reunification scene was like, because you're holding a broken piece of crib. I could have seen it devolving into a fight, or you being scared of him if you didn't understand. But it seems like the one thing that goes through Severance is that love is able to conquer the thresholds of the severance, and you still have some innate feeling inside knowing that Mark is a person that is a good person in your life, not a bad person.
Yeah, I think internally, whatever innie she is, she's always going to have that feeling of, I don't know why, but like you feel familiar. I mean, it must happen to you. Like you see people and you're like, oh, like I feel maybe I met them like a long time ago, or that you just like feel like you can trust them innately. It's just like this intuition that scene. We did it lots of different ways. Adam is just so spectacular when he comes through that door covered in blood after that insane fight, which is legendary. I mean, Midari, just incredible. Covered in blood. I mean, yeah, we spent a lot of time on that scene, and I think they did a beautiful job picking the takes that they used. I think the most challenging thing for me was going from this like innie to then transitioning into Gemma and seeing Mark, because in our human existence, there's no ramp into that moment. Like if you're in a scene, there's like a crescendo into like an emotion, but it was like one of those moments where it has to be like a real like gut punch, like happen all of a sudden. And I think that was the hardest moment technically. And I think once Gemma sees Mark, I'll speak for myself, I just got caught up with the story of it. To Adam was just so in it and doing such authentic, like beautiful work. It was hard not to just get carried away with the moment, because like as a character, like as an actor playing a character, that's all you want them to be reunited. Like he's been mourning this woman for 2 seasons. His life is completely miserable, and it's been such an arduous journey for him. And as much as you want it for her, even though you've spent such a short amount of time with her, you just want it for Mark.
I think it was a great scene, and by the time you guys are kissing in the elevator and then not remembering who you are, that was like another great moment.
Oh no, that was poor Miss Casey.
She's a very confused girl, Miss Casey. But I'm curious. Just
had to have been. I think I decided that she didn't know what was happening, but I think she was happy it was happening, because she was drawn to him. Like in season 1, like the best part of her life was just being in proximity of him. And I think when she's in the elevator in 7, she wants to ask Milchick like where Mark is. That's what I decided it was in my head. She's like, and she wants to say, where's Mark S? But she never gets to ask, and she gets like sent down into the bowels of the building. But for me, it's open to interpretation. but I was like, I think she's happy that this is happening, but she doesn't know what's happening.
She should be terrified she's kissing a guy covered in blood, but she's generally happy. She knows he's a good egg one way or another. But you also got to experience the quintessential Severance moment as an actor, which is running down a hallway. You finally got your runs down hallways, not just the escape, but now you're running with Mark. Just practically, how long are those hallways, or are some of them blue screened? Tell me, just because you had to do a lot of running, how are those sets?
I tell you who's amazing is Mark, our cameraman, who would take off his shoes and do a lot of the running. There were a couple of moments where I had to switch out with a double because there was something to do with the shoes, and then I had like a little heel injury. It wasn't a big deal, but I did have to run in those hallways, and they're real. Like, there is no green screen. I mean, there are hallways as long as a stage, and at the end there'll be a green screen so they can do like a set extension. But all of that running was filmed with the cameraman running with no shoes on. And I think he was wearing like knee braces because he'd had knee injuries in the past. But this camera operator was just like one of the best I've ever seen. Like, he was just ready to do anything. I probably shouldn't have said he took off his shoes because it's probably not allowed.
I would think it would be allowed.
I didn't say his last name, so we're
yes, good. But I would think it would be allowed because it would make it safer, because you would probably have better traction.
Well, yeah, and I think it's very slippery. Like, I slipped on that.
It looks slippery.
You call it linoleum? Is that the American term? It's super slippery. But he was just like, he was like a badass camera operator.
I mean, one of the tragedies, the dark tragedy, in the final moments is Gemma being in the exit stairwell. So she's back to herself now, and she sees Mark, who she also has been wanting to reunite with, and she sees him pause. And so the wave of emotions of just the panic and fear of let's get out of here, to realizing that he's not coming with her, which is confusing to her for a million different reasons. Like, tell us how you kind of emotionally trajected that scene, because I could see it being like a roller coaster with peaks and valleys.
Gemma's timeline in that is insane if you think about it. It's like she goes into Cold Harbor, she comes out, and there's Mark, and then they're running, and they're in an elevator, and then all of a sudden she's outside. So it's like a lot for her to compute all at once. That transition was like another really hard one, just technically, because, Miss Casey's going through the threshold, and then it's Gemma, and she's like, she's kissing Mark, and now she's outside. And also, just technically, there was a big space to travel. Like, most people transition in the elevator in one spot, or Brit transitioned underwater, and it was just sort of like that. But when you have to move with the Zolly, it's very complicated because, like, as you walk, you get shorter and taller, and the Zolly isn't going to go like this as you walk. So you have to move this great distance to transition.
Just for our listeners, people know what a dolly is. Tell them what a Zolly is.
Oh, a Zolly is actually, it's a camera move. It's a very specific camera move that it does this like zoom, push in, push out thing, but it's a specific lens, and there's like a Zolly operator, and it's a very specific job. Like, he has to come to set on the days where we're doing these transitions because of the rig that it's on. And I hope you ask Jessica this question because she will be able to answer it way better than me. It's a very specific shot. It's where the characters in the show go from their innie to their outie. That's the moment. So again, just a very big leap to make emotionally in a short period of time, but also to technically get it right. I remember thinking, I'm going to get fired today. They're going to fire me, because I was like, this is like my 20th take trying to get this shot. And it was just because of, like, it's so hard to hit your mark, like, to that precise moment when there's so many steps before it, while you're staying the same height, while you're going through emotional roller coaster. And I mean, everyone was so patient. They were trying to figure out how to do what could we do with the camera to make it work better, and what could I do to help them. And I just I was
And
like,
it was when you were going to the stairwell? That's the
it,
shot
it was
that
going out from Miss Casey to Gemma on the other side of that door.
got it. Okay.
My husband and my daughter were there that day, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get fired. Like, I can't do this shot. I'm letting everybody down.
Luckily, you
And
did not get fired. You still
I
gave a
didn't
great
get
performance. So
fired.
I'm
They're still
guessing that they
fine,
just,
Jeff.
yeah, I'm guessing that they just got the camera stuff right on your 20th take. And
Yeah, it was a process. And then we had to shoot that emotional scene, on the other
right.
side of the door. So it was like, it was a really, really difficult day, and then banging on the door and, seeing Heliar at the other end of the hallway and trying to piece together very quickly what happened to him. And I imagine in my head, I mean, it's kind of goes with her timeline. I think she figures out, oh my God, he must have severed himself, because why would he go from like rescuing her to kissing her in the elevator to walking away from her without having gone through that, So
Yeah.
she just puts two and two together.
There's a lot of off-screen math. One of the things that actors do that's interesting, and I'm curious if you did it, is that sometimes there's something of their own personal life that they like to put into a performance. It could be a moment, a gesture, something physical. Was there anything like that for you, where you really were relying on something personal to bring your performance to life for a certain scene or a certain moment? Sometimes people, they use sense memories as actors, thinking of something from their youth or earlier in their life, both happy times and traumatic times. So I'm just curious if there's something.
Oh, you mean like to get me to where I am emotionally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I mean, I try just for my psychological state to use my breath and trying to put my body in that state of stress to get there as much as I can, because the mind can follow the body and the body can follow the mind. And, technically there are just so many things you can do. But I did, there were some really personal moments. I lost someone very, very close to me a couple of years ago. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
there were some moments where, where the character's thinking about, life and death and loss, where it just naturally takes you into that place where you're thinking, because it was a sort of a direct parallel, like loss. It takes you as a human being, you just start thinking about like someone that you lost. And I went there, and it was a really painful moment. I mean, you don't see it up close. I think the way they shot it, it was sort of silhouetted.
Which scene was it where your memory recall
When
was
she's
such a
in
great
the
tool?
bathroom and
Okay.
she realizes, that it's not happening.
In the
And
shower?
no, it was when she sort of just closes the door when he's calling her, and I think the pregnancy test is like negative, and there was a lot more of that didn't make it into the cut. But it's just that subject matter of losses is just so similar. It sort of naturally takes you into it, and in a way, it's kind of like a little nod to the person, and like for you personally when you see it, because it's like they're part of the journey, the creative journey with you. And I feel like no one really dies until they're forgotten. So remembrance is like a form of visitation. And I think that if they come to you in those moments when there's like a parallel, it's something that, it's just a special moment that you have with them creatively. Maybe this is all too esoteric.
No, I think that's a beautiful way of saying it, in which you're able to bring something from your personal life, which makes your performance even more engaging. Memory recall is an important part of acting. And, some actors use it, some don't. It's just another tool. I think you definitely used it effectively there. Just a couple last quick questions. Was there anything interesting that was cut from season 2 that you remember being fun, funny, weird?
We had like a scene by the Christmas tree that I'm not quite sure. I never asked why they cut it, but maybe I was just bad. I don't know. There was a scene where Mark and Gemma are talking about another family who they're reading a Christmas card, like a funny Christmas card from another
Right.
family, and they kind of have a giggle about it. And it sort of turns into like a happy moment that turns into a heavy moment. I think it's probably good that it's not not there because I don't feel like it needed it. But there was some stuff that we lost from the meet cute, but I think it just ended up being perfect. So they're so good at that. Like the amount of scrutiny they go through with the editing process is just remarkable. And I think it really pays off. Because when I'm watching it as a fan, I don't miss those things and I don't think about it. And it feels like that's always how it was meant to be.
Was there more with Dr. Maurer being kind of creepy in the Christmas scene that you had with him writing the letters from purgatory? Because again, that sparks kind of the rebellion where he's kind of forcing you to say, I love you. And you could see on your face that your character knows it's wrong.
Yeah, no, that scene actually is as it was.
Okay.
I didn't touch anything from that scene. It was such an incredible set and the costumes, and Robbie Benson's so amazing. The one that went through the most changes was the dentist scene.
Okay.
That went from a lot more pages and it got like a lot smaller. I'm not sure. I mean, have you actually spoken to Dan Erickson yet? Have you?
I'm going to.
Oh, you're gonna love him. You can ask him about that. That was the one that had the most work, and I think it worked. Like I think it worked out.
Oh yeah, it absolutely works. What was your toughest scene? What was the scene as an actor that you were really sweating, doing your homework on, and how did you overcome the challenge creatively in season 2?
You know, I found the scenes with Sandra when she's getting, that made the cut, didn't it? The woe stones, or she's holding the woe meter where Sandra's like dialing. I think that got like truncated a little. I was curious, like that was the hard one because
really, out of all the scenes, that was the hard one, huh? No, that's interesting.
Because it was like, I mean, we worked on the relationship and we had a lot of rehearsal, and Sandra's just like an extraordinary actress. And I think leading up to it, I was just like, where does she need to be sitting in this moment? Because my interpretation was like, she just wants to get out of this place. So where does she sit? And I think once I got to set and we rehearsed and like Jessica was there, I felt like a lot better about it. And I think we found our flow. But leading up to it, I was nervous about those scenes just because there was a lot of information about how she got there and all these things that as audience we don't know, and you can ask Dan, but I don't know yet either. So it was about like those nerves around finding that balance, but it turned out beautifully and all things were settled once like I got to set and everyone had a discussion about it. And that's what's really another cool thing about working on the show, and maybe I'm just repeating myself now, but is that like everyone cares so much in every department. They all contribute to like the character of the building, of the world, of your character, and you're in such good hands that even if you're not certain, you'll find it.
I mean, and that's what's so interesting is that was your toughest scene, in which it's a scene that's spoken almost in code at different points. So I could see as an actor that being challenging to figure out how to play, because some of the code you're not even aware of what it means or what the ulterior, intentions are from the Lumen company, and even asking some of those questions and doing some of those tests. So that's interesting.
Yeah, there's an ambiguity to it. You're not quite sure what's the point of view. And so there's a mystical element about it, I guess. So that, yeah, I guess that was the most nerve-wracking.
I like to say this to writers that have come up and it had not been produced, but had been listening to the podcast or coming to the screening series. You are the 40th person, I believe, to go from kind of being a listener, casual listener, coming to the screenings who's in the podcast. So congrats to you on taking the title of 40 over the years. So
thank you. That's amazing.
I think it's really cool. And I'm so happy it's an actor, which is different as well. That's awesome. I guess what could you tell us is next? What are you doing that's next that you want to tell us about?
I got something exciting I'm going to do next week, which I can't actually say right now.
That's fine.
That they won't let me, but I'm just excited that Like, people are loving the show, and I'm excited to be just in the world and in this like crazy time where there's so much unknown and so much uncertainty. Like with AI, you were talking about AI, there's all these things which, there's scary things happening, but
Sure.
I think that, it's everything in life is a double-edged sword. And I think that ultimately there'll be a lot of creativity and a lot of appreciation of creativity to come. That finite aspect of it, but the human aspect of it will become so much more special and unique. I think that it's going to be a really interesting time.
Well, look, Dichen, you've been very generous with your time. I love all the work that you did on Severance, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Thanks so much for coming down and chatting today.
Thank you. And I hope I can be on your show again as a writer one day,
I
or
would love it. I would love it. I was gonna say, like, I
out
hope you
there.
do write something that's personal to you or just fascinating to you or entertaining to you, and you one day come back as a writer. I mean, actors always have a great sense of dialogue in their work. So I know that even if you're writing something for yourself, especially, it'll translate, but even if it's for another actor, that could be great too. So
Yeah.
I hope to see it as well.
Fingers crossed. I really appreciate what you do. Honestly, like, it really was such a big part of my education. And so I'm very grateful to you and to any new listeners out there. Go back. There's so much knowledge in all the podcasts Jeff has done with extraordinary people. And as an actor, a writer, director, and just anyone who wants to operate in this space, in this crazy world, there's just so much insight and knowledge.
Well, thanks again for the kudos. I realize that I have about, I think, 400 or 500 episodes that aren't even online. That's how long I've been doing it. So I'm going to start like an archive or Patreon or something so that people can find those episodes as well. So, but
You
then,
should. It's gold. Yeah, it's such gold for people.
well,
And the people you've had on, I mean, it's incredible.
well, right back at you. I'm so psyched that I was able to have you on today. I absolutely loved your performance at Severance, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you, Jeff.
And that's how the Q&A went down. Special thanks again to actor Dichen Lachman for being so generous with her time and coming down to chat about her acting career and her role on Severance Season 2, which is Emmy eligible. And while you're surfing around online, I hope you check out Backstory Magazine. We just published a new issue. It's our summer issue. It's our Emmy Contenders issue. It's issue 56. And this is our 13th year of publishing. It's my 20th year of podcasting, and I certainly could not have done it without your support. So thanks for your support. If you've never read us before and you want to test drive us, you could read our free issue at backstory.net on a desktop or laptop or via our iPad app, Backstory. And if you like what you see, and I'm sure that you will, you could use discount coupon code SAVE5 to save $5 off a 1-year subscription. So look, it would really mean a lot to me to have my podcast listeners and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and my YouTube watchers of the Backstory Magazine YouTube page, which is where you could see all these Zoomcasts. That's right, you could see us hanging out and talking. It would really mean a lot to me to have you show your support for independent entertainment journalism. So thanks for considering becoming a subscriber. The Q&A with Jeff Goldsmith podcast is a copyright of Unlikely Films Incorporated in 2025. All rights reserved. And folks, if you want to drop me a line, I'm really easy to find. You could find me as Yo Goldsmith on Blue Sky or Backstory_mag on Blue Sky, or Yo Goldsmith on Twitter or Backstory_mag on Twitter, or Yo Goldsmith on Instagram or Backstory_mag on Instagram. Do you see a trend here? I also have a Facebook fan page, which is an easy way to connect. And of course, you could go old school and drop me a line anytime, backstoryletters@gmail.com, and I will do my darndest to respond. I'm Jeff Goldsmith, the publisher of Backstory Magazine and the host of the Q&A, thanking you for tuning in and telling you to stay out of trouble. Till next week.